So we have, we'll invite Ericsson to join us as well. Hold on, I'll just remove this. Yeah, there you are. Do we now open the floor for questions since we are a bit, let's see. We can, Christine? Yeah, so we'll take questions until 3. Okay. Okay, so we will be taking, we'll be taking questions until 3:05. So now we have our first.
Yeah, I ran down.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so
Question.
I have a question for both of you. Or yes. So 3 things. 1, what is a suksok? 2, an emotional reaction to your presentation earlier when you were showing the cannons, the lantakas, and then the dates, and you said you can match the dates to the battles, and I felt like, wow, that's terrible. Why is it not with us? And at the end of your talk, this morning, I felt like a rape victim who needed to report a crime. But then, yes, Dr. Baker said, I will play devil's advocate. Those things wouldn't have survived the Battle of Manila. So there's lots of things to talk about. But my question for both of you is, we've been talking a lot about plunder, how all the plunder that the British did when they invaded the British. That's my husband, by the way, he's British. Don't sit next to him, he might colonize you. I wondered whether there was a system, because when they came to plunder, did the soldiers do it randomly, or was there a plan? Did the British say, okay, this is what we're going to do, we're going to look for this, you're going to put them in the truck and we'll take them to the ship?
Ericsson, would you like to answer the question first, and then Sir Ricky?
Well, briefly, with the narrative made by our Castro, it was actually put into auction. So it was sold by the British soldiers to a particular Orindain, a Chinese mestizo in Manila. Then that guy also sold it little by little in public, and although some of the materials were recovered actually, but many things were lost already. It was too late for them to recover, especially documents. But the convent, the whole convent was sold into auction. Was put into auction.
Okay, thank you, Sir Ricky.
I'm not too sure about a system for plunder. I guess if I were a common soldier, anything that glitters, I would grab, no? Kaya nga, I don't know why they were interested in books. I guess if there were engineers or higher placed officials in the plundering, then they would go after the books. But if I was an ordinary soldier, I'd get the ivory head, the crown, the vestments. And this is, I think there were stories of soldiers parading in the liturgical vestments then. Also because obviously it was a fight against 2 churches, no? So you would have that kind of event as well. But plunder aside, I think we should also consider that there were the other things that came to Spain were not just plunder, but gifts and souvenirs. So we also given that you should also consider that scholars have also been collecting their own artifacts for their own studies, and they're not always available here. So I'd like to give special mention to Sergey over here, who is our friend from St. Petersburg. And he speaks Tagalog. Huwag kayo mag-ano dahil marunong mag-Tagalog yan. Ang asawa niya, Ifugao. Okay, so how did I meet Sergey? I met Sergey through his teacher, Maria Stanikovich, who is one of the world's foremost scholars on Ifugao, whom I met in 1976, in our concert in Leningrad, after our concert in Leningrad, there were these Russians, young teenage Russians who came. Maaari ba kayong kaming makiusap sa inyo? Ganon. Very deep Tagalog, and we were shocked. One of them turned out to be Maria Stanukovich. So she toured us around the Hermitage and to the Pushkin Gallery. She took over Roy Barton's desk in the St. Peter the Great Museum of Ethnography. So we have become friends since then. And so she's now exercising her influence through the younger people, like what we've been advocating since then. Having said that, also, the best Yakan collection of textiles and artifacts is in Copenhagen. Why? Because it was collected by a Danish anthropologist in 1950s, Inger Wolf, when there was a steamship line linking Basilan to Copenhagen. So the things you find in the Danish National Museum of the Yakan are not found anymore in Basilan. So you cannot blame the Danish for plundering the collection. No? So there are all kinds of ways that the Filipino artifacts entered the diaspora.
Okay. Thank you for your presentations. I think all very, very intriguing and interesting. As you have done 3 presentations, I have some more questions for you. Maybe I can ask them. Some of them are very short, actually. The larger cannons, size-wise, most of these cannons, as I've understood, the Moro Wars were used on boats like swivel guns. So what was the largest cannon that you've seen and how were they used? I guess they were not on boats, but on fortifications. The chain mails, the ones we've seen were really beautiful. Were they used like really for use in battle, or were they more ceremonious ones? And from when are they? Because at the end of the 19th century, would they make any sense in the defense? Cannonballs. I've read a situation when in Sulu, the people were gathering the cannonballs that the Spaniards shot at them, taking them out and reused them. So technical question, is it possible? How is it possible? And the third question regarding to the book you presented. Have you seen evidence of the calculations done in the book really used, applied in the Philippines? And one general comment, more or less, because we've talked about the topic of heritage and being taken away, colonization. One type of heritage in the Philippines, apart from the religious heritage, is what René Javellana was investigating, the defensive infrastructure. And I was wondering in general, how is this idea followed up? Is there still much going on in that regard? Is the data collection going on in regard to defensive infrastructure in the Philippines, and how this works? Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. Please help me in the question. I will answer the last question about studies on fortification. The last word on fortification was in the Cultural Center of the Philippines Encyclopedia of Philippine Art, which is some entries on fortifications, and that came out in 2019. It was the architecture volume was edited by Father Javellana, and I'm the assistant editor. So up to now, we're still continuing research, and recently we have found seemingly pre-Hispanic fortifications by the archaeologist, I forget his name now, but it's done through radar, certain embankments in Lubang Island that seem to antedate the arrival of the Spaniards. Very, very interesting because it uses high-tech technology. So it would be very interesting to compare that kind of fortification with what we have now. Okay, now about the measurements of the stone, the cannonball. I don't know if that's true, but one of the cannon we had here was a pedrero, and that shot stones. So the stones could have been reused. Now about the measurements of the, I leave that up to further scholars to do. What is the first question?
Chainmail.
The chainmail, yeah, that with the lantakas and the sizes of the lantakas would be I think by the 19th century, a lot of them would be ceremonial, like those double-barreled lantakas. I just received word from Annabelle Gallop from the British Library. She watched the presentation this morning. She was happy to see the double-barreled lantakas, and she said she found also she sent me pictures that she saw in Venice. So iyan pa yan, no? We don't know about the Italian, Philippine Italian diaspora. So okay, I think, and then there was that question about the suksok. The suksok, yeah. Okay, that's my invention. But no, kasi it has already mentioned by Margarita Estrella Marcos that in Philippine ivories you find this tuck behind the back of essentially the images of the Virgin, and going over so many examples of these images, and they all exhibit some Filipino ivory techniques of the eyes, the almond eyes, and then the rings around the neck, which is also Buddhist influence. But the conjunction of them all is Filipino, Chinese, Hispanic ivory, and only they have the suksok. You do not find them in Chinese ivories. And they occur up to the 19th century. And if you look at the side of the profile of the Virgin, why is that? Why is that tuck? The tuck was mentioned by Estrella Marcos as a royal dress. You know, when you have a gown, then you tuck the train under the belt, so it doesn't drag on the floor. So it was only worn by royalty. Now, my interpretation is that the local carver invested royalty on his image by putting the tuck, because you do not see it elsewhere in other ivory sculptures, and only he could see it because it's at the back. So there was no meaning for the observer in the front. So this was a kind of spiritual pact between the carver and the image. If you look at the side view of the image, the tuck does not match the belt. So your belt is here, the tuck can be here or down. So the tuck is many times illogically placed. So for me, the artist had to put the tuck, the suksok, just to indicate that it is his crowning of the Virgin, or giving her royalty. Yeah, that can be contested, but that's my interpretation.
Sir Ricky, when I was doing Castellanes de Cavite again, there was this 1753 planos of the different fortifications, and these planos were made by Nicolas Bagay. So when you said that the thesis was by another Bagay, I was thinking of something like Recto Avenue. Was it copied by the sun, or these fortifications? No? So there was already a many samples of fortifications done by Nicolas Bagay also.
These are sketches.
1753.
Sketches in the engraving.
of the Intramuros, of Puerta de San Felipe and others, including Zamboanga and other. So
Where are they kept? AGI?
in the Pares, yeah, in the AGI, yeah. So we could compare them. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any more questions? Okay, we'll take one last question and then we'll go for coffee break.
This question is for Father Borre. I was wondering, you showed the list of books. You said they were lost, or these are books that, what happened to these books? Could you say a little bit more?
Those list of books, yeah, majority of them appear in the biographical works of the friars. Like for example, in the there are like 10 works of biographies that written by Augustinian friars throughout the ages. But those works appeared all the time. But the thing is, whenever you would like to find one of them, you cannot find them in our libraries, neither in our archive.
So one of the books that we found that is in the inventario that was at the library at the is the Mentrida Arte de la Lengua Bisaya, and it was it's actually in that catalog. So it's possible that is in our collection. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But that the one that he's he's talking about
In our library and in our they are no longer here.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much to our panelists, to our speakers, and to all of you for this session. We will now take a break and resume at 3:30.